The regular season is over and the playoffs are about to begin. It's the LA Kings against the Edmonton Oilers for a second year in a row. How do the Kings advance this time around? We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. If you could leave a positive comment on Apple Podcasts, that would be much appreciated. We're also available on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. My name is Eddie Garcia. I'm your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 16 years and a passionate LA Kings fan for the past 30 years. It is time to get excited about the Stanley Cup playoffs, which begin for the LA Kings on Monday in Edmonton against the Oilers. But before we get into that, it's time to take a quick look back, close the door on the regular season. That means the regular season finale last night in Anaheim against the Ducks, where the Kings posted a 5-3 victory. That victory was a weird game, I think, for Kings fans, and I guess for Ducks fans too, if we're going to be honest about it. Of course, you always want to beat the Ducks. They're my most hated rival. I know they're certainly got to be in the top 3, top 5 for most Kings fans anywhere. And it's the final game of the season. You want to close the book on the regular season with a good taste in your mouth, want to go into the playoffs on a high note, but you also don't want to get anybody hurt in this game. How competitive do you play it in this one? You know, once you get out there and the juices are flowing, that competitive nature kind of takes over, and you're like, no, guys, don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. And for the Ducks, it was weird too, because you want to beat your rival. You've had a horrific season. You're riding a 12-game losing streak. You don't want to go into the offseason losing 13 in a row. You don't want to be swept for the first time ever by your rivals to the north. But also the Ducks are looking to be as bad as possible because they want the best odds in the draft lottery for the number 1 overall pick, which is Connor Bedard, who's supposed to be a superstar. So like I said, it was a weird game. In the end, the Kings were the better team and got the victory. They do end up sweeping the Ducks for the first time ever, winning all 3 matchups this season. Not a great performance by the Kings, but good enough. And I think most importantly, it looks like they got out of the game unscathed without any injuries. There was a moment when Arthur Kaliyev got hit from behind into the boards late. He ended up getting cut on the side of the face. But there are no reports that he is having any issues afterwards. He did stay on the bench and finish out the game. As for the game itself, Anze Kopitar, one of the highlights, picking up his 28th goal of the season. He finishes with 74 points to lead the Kings in scoring once again, 5th straight season that's happened, and the 15th time in his 17 years with the Kings he has led them in scoring. The captain had a terrific regular season, most goals and most points he's had in a season since his Hart Trophy finalist season back in the 2007-18 season. Jonas Korpisalo got the start, back-to-back games for him in what is expected to be his final regular season tune-up before starting game 1 of the playoffs. That hasn't officially been announced, but I think we've all seen the writing on the wall at this point. I thought he was okay in the game. He allowed 3 goals on 24 shots. A couple of them were a turnover turned into a goal, and then some bad defense as well. He ends his regular season as an LA King with a 7-3-1 record. His goals against average with the Kings, 2.13 and a 921 save percentage. Got to give out the crown for our star of the game, and that obviously goes to Adrian Kempe. He recorded a hat trick in the process, hits the 40-goal mark for the first time in his career. He finishes the season with a career high 41 goals. He is the first LA King to score 40 goals in a season since Luc Robitaille did it in the 1993-94 season. Luke had 44 that year. So Kempe gets the crown. The man they call Juice, Adrian Kempe, wears the crown for our player of the game for the regular season finale against the Anaheim Ducks. Long live the King. As for the health of the team, no Kevin Fiala, no Gabe Velarde, no Alex Edler in this regular season finale. And why put him out there? Why risk anything? Might as well let him rest up. I know maybe if they're close to returning, maybe they'd like to get that one game under their belt before they kind of hit the ground running in the playoffs. But bottom line is, we're hoping, we're keeping our fingers crossed, as head coach Todd McClellan said, that they will be available, if not for game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, maybe somewhere early in the series, but would love to see those guys in the lineup, especially Velarde and Fiala. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the matchup against the Edmonton Oilers. I did want to mention, well done to all Kings fans who went down and represented in Anaheim, or as some refer to it, Crypto South. I have been to a few Kings Ducks games down there in Anaheim, and usually it's a good time. So great to see all the LA Kings fans representing down there in Orange County. Best game I ever saw in that building, Game 7 during the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs. That was an old timer there, but it looked like a good time had by most. It was a bit of a spirited game late. Things got a little bit physical, but like I said, in the end, I think Kings and Ducks fans, frankly, walk away from this one both happy. The Kings didn't get anybody hurt. They win the game. They go into the playoffs on a little bit of a high note. As for the Ducks, it was a terrible season. They fired their coach earlier today, and they're looking towards the future, and the future might begin with them getting Connor Bedard and that first pick in the draft. They've got some pretty good odds to land that first overall pick, so we'll see how it goes for them going forward. But obviously, if you're a Kings fan, you're talking about the playoffs right now. But I do want to take a quick look back on this regular season, and it's been a great regular season for the LA Kings. The Kings had 9 different players set new career highs in goals and points this season, led by Adrian Kempe, who we talked about. Gabe Velarde also should be mentioned as well. Kempe had 6 more goals and 13 more points than he did last season, which was a career year for him. Velarde posted 13 more goals and 18 more points than his previous career best, and was really the breakout player for the Kings this season. Too bad his numbers were impacted a bit by the games he missed late in the season due to injury, but I think we all feel a lot better right now about the future for Gabe Velarde than we did going into this season. Also, can't forget about Phoenix Copley and what he did this season for the Kings. Obviously, it was a career year for him. 8 more wins than he had ever had during an NHL season, which is, not a lot of NHL experience. Finishes with a 24-6-3 record. He's the fastest Kings goalie in history to reach 20 wins in a season. I believe it was 29 games he did it in. Third best winning percentage during this regular season in the NHL amongst all goalies who played at least 20 games goes to Phoenix Copley. A great, great year for him. As for the team, they finished with a 47-25-10 record for 105 points. That's 47 wins on the season I mentioned. That is the second most wins in a single season in franchise history, only behind the 2015-16 team, which had 48 wins. And the 104 points by the Kings, also second most in franchise history, behind only the 105 points in a season by the 1974-75 LA Kings. All in all, a very good regular season for the Los Angeles Kings. But it's now time to close the book on the regular season. We open up the book on the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to be a huge challenge for the LA Kings. We're going to talk much more about that in just a moment. But I do want to remind you that today's episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs start this weekend, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's a bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It is safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on anything from the money line to points scored to three-pointers made. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a bigger chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in a bonus bet back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Well, I did call it a while back, and it has turned out to be the case. The LA Kings are facing the Edmonton Oilers in the first round of the playoffs. Kind of seemed like it was a bit destined to go that way for a while. The Oilers did win their final game of the regular season on Thursday, beating the Sharks 5-2. That forced the Vegas Golden Knights to have to get at least a point in their final game against Seattle to capture the division, which they did in a 3-1 win over the Kraken. So the Golden Knights win the Pacific Division. The Oilers finished second, and that sets up a 2-3 matchup against the LA Kings for a second straight season. The two teams split their 4 games during the regular season, Edmonton winning the last 2 matchups. Both games were tightly contested. The Oilers winning on March the 30th, 3-1, and then winning on April the 4th, 2-0. Of course, the Kings took the Oilers to 7 games last season before being eliminated. So what about this time around? Well, I think there's no question the LA Kings are a better team this year than they were last year. But then again, so are the Edmonton Oilers. I've talked about it a few times on the show lately, but the Oilers are playing as well right now as any team in the NHL. Since March the 1st, no team in the NHL has more wins and points than the Oilers, and that includes the Boston Bruins, who set an NHL record for most wins and points in a season this year. The Oilers are 18-2-1 since March the 1st. They have the 2 best players in the NHL in Connor McDavid, who is going to win the Hart Trophy as league MVP, 64 goals, 153 points in a career year for the best player in the NHL. And his teammate Leon Draisaitl, second in the NHL in points with 128, fourth in goals with 52, and first in power play goals with 32. And speaking of the Oilers power play, they finished with the highest power play percentage in NHL history at 32.4. Everybody's going to pick the Oilers to win this series, and you can't blame them. The Oilers have had an incredible season. They've got the star power, and it seems of late they've had the defense and the goaltending. And like I said, a strong argument can be made that the Edmonton Oilers right now are the best team in the NHL. That said, I would make the argument that no team this season has played the Edmonton Oilers tougher than the Los Angeles Kings. The Oilers lead the NHL in goals per game, 3.96. But against the LA Kings, in those 4 meetings, their goals per game was 2.25, by far their lowest total of any of the teams that they faced 4 times. And as a matter of fact, as far as all teams that they faced, only 2 other teams did they score less against per average per game. And that was a team that they only faced twice. So when you consider that the Kings played them twice as many times and were able to hold them to, again, 2.25 goals per game when they're averaging almost 4 goals per game, that's pretty encouraging. We talked about Connor McDavid. We talked about Leon Draisaitl. They did not have their better games against the Kings this season. Connor McDavid had a total of 2 goals and 3 points in 4 games. The only other team that McDavid had fewer points against was the Bruins, and he faced them only twice. He faced the Kings 4 times. The Kings' penalty kill has been great against the Oilers this season. And we talked about the Oilers. Their power play this year is historically good. The Oilers had 12 power play opportunities in 4 games against the Kings. They scored 2 power play goals. Again, this season, they are averaging scoring on the power play at 32.4%. Against the Kings, it's 16.6%. Leon Draisaitl finished with 4 power play goals away from being the all-time power play goal scorer in NHL history. He's got 1 power play goal in 4 games against the Kings. If the Kings can do what they did this season against the Edmonton Oilers when it comes to containing Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and containing that power play, the Kings got a chance in this one. Now, the regular season is the regular season. The playoffs are a whole different animal. I get that. But I think there are encouraging reasons to look to think that the Kings can actually make this happen. Again, they've been very competitive head to head against the Oilers, even in the last month or so when the Oilers have been playing their best hockey of the season. Talked about what they did against the power play, talked about containing their stars. Those are all very positive signs for the LA Kings. The Oilers are starting a rookie goalie, Stuart Skinner. He has no Stanley Cup playoff experience. How is he going to react under those lights, under that pressure? We don't know. He doesn't know. The Oilers don't know. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe he does step up to the challenge. Maybe he continues what he's done late in the regular season of the playoffs. But again, the playoffs are a different animal. It's a different season. It's a whole new set of circumstances. If he could let in an early goal or 2, maybe it shakes his confidence. Maybe it shakes the team's confidence in him. It's certainly a factor going into the playoffs that we'll be keeping a close eye on. As for the key for the Kings, or the keys for the Kings, I would say obviously don't change anything from really what you've been doing in the regular season. Continue to play that solid defense. Continue to block shots, win faceoffs, do what you've been doing on the penalty kill. I think it's actually been pretty much good enough, but where the Kings have to improve is on their power play. Again, the Kings PK has been fantastic against the Oilers. The Kings power play, though, has to do more. The last two meetings against the Edmonton Oilers, the Kings were 0 for 7 with the man advantage. And this is a power play that ended up ranked 4th in the NHL this season. That's not good enough. Now, the big question for the LA Kings really is, can they beat the Oilers without Kevin Fiala and Gabe Vilardi? Not impossible, but it is going to be more difficult without one of those guys or both of those guys in the lineup. Now, Vilardi has missed the last 9 games with a lower body injury. Fiala has missed the last 6 in a row and 10 of 13 with a lower body injury. And those guys are so important to give the Kings a much more formidable lineup. Kevin Fiala out there on the third line makes that matchup so much more difficult. Gabe Vilardi out there on the third or the fourth line, huge addition that really can't be understated. Now, the Kings' season average in goals per game is 3.41. If you just look at those 8 games where both Fiala and Vilardi were out of the lineup late in the season, the Kings were almost scoring a full goal less per game at 2.44. The Kings' power play percentage for the season, 25.3%. If you look at those 8 games where both Fiala and Vilardi missed, it's at 20.8%. The number one power play unit without Fiala and Vilardi has been okay, but the effect on the second power play unit has been huge. Fiala and Vilardi on the top power play unit means that Victor Arvidsson and Alex Iafallo can play on the second unit. And that second unit without those two guys has been non-existent. Again, looking at those 8 games where Fiala and Vilardi have been out together, that second power play unit, 0 goals. Of the 8 games, the Kings were 5 for 23 on the power play. All 5 of their goals were scored by the number one power play unit. And if you've paid attention all season long, that second power play unit on the whole has been just as good, if not better, than the top power play unit, but not without Fiala and Vilardi out of the lineup. So it goes without saying, but those are just some of the points as far as offensively, how much more potent the Kings are with Fiala and Vilardi in the lineup, how much better the power play unit as a whole, first and second power play unit together, is so much better with those two guys in the lineup. Again, it's a huge, huge X factor. Do I think the Kings, do they have a chance of advancing without those two guys? The old Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, but their chances go up a lot better with those two guys. It goes without saying, but again, that's just an example of how their offense is better, almost a goal per game better with those two guys. The power play on a whole is so much more better, both the first and second units. So it's going to be very important, and we won't know. We'll see how it goes. It's likely we will not know until the puck drops for game 1 if those guys are going to be in the lineup or not. Or, of course, a little bit before that, but you know what I'm saying. It's unlikely we're going to get any news over the weekend. It would be great if we did. But teams are very tight-lipped about injuries in the postseason. So we're all going to be paying attention to Twitter. We're going to be seeing what the warm-up is like, but it's going to be huge. If Kevin Fiala and Gabe Vilardi can give the Kings something in the playoffs, starting right off the bat, it certainly will help their chances greatly of having a different outcome this time around in the playoffs against the Edmonton Oilers. And I talked about it in some of the first few shows I did of this. I asked, who is the Kings' biggest rival? Because I was curious to see what you guys had to say. And there were varying answers, but I did say, rivalries are made in the playoffs, and the Kings and Oilers had the potential to be the kind of emerging as a really, really good rivalry. Meet a team two years in a row in the playoffs, that's just going to go up. So it's a budding rivalry. We know there's bad blood between the two teams. What happened last year in the playoffs between Mikey Anderson and Leon Draisaitl? What happened this year in the regular season between Connor McDavid and Mikey Anderson? So it all just adds a little bit extra to, again, what is growing into a great rivalry. And hoping the Kings can knock the Oilers out and kind of shock the hockey world a little bit and just make that rivalry go up another notch. But we're excited to get it going. Game 1 coming up on Monday in Edmonton. I'm going to talk a little bit about some regular season awards and also what does the postseason schedule look like for the LA Kings. That's coming up in just a minute. But I want to thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Once you finish, check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysts that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so here is the schedule for the Stanley Cup playoffs, at least the first two games. The LA Kings will be in Edmonton for game one of their series on Monday. Time has yet to be determined, but obviously it will be 6, 7 o'clock Pacific time. Obviously, Edmonton is in the Mountain Time zone. I believe there's two other games scheduled to be played on Monday as well. As it stands right now, the Kings would be the final game of the night. So looking forward to that. Game one again in Edmonton on Monday, and game two will be Wednesday in Edmonton as well. Again, the time has not been officially determined. It is expected, although not official, that games 3 and 4 in LA will be Friday and Sunday at Crypto.com Arena. The LA Clippers and the LA Lakers are both in the playoffs as well. It's going to be an extremely busy time down there at Crypto.com Arena as far as the folks that work there to be accommodating all three of these teams in the playoffs. And the playoff schedule, as I understand it, has Friday and Sunday open for the LA Kings, kind of working around what's going on with the two NBA teams in the playoffs as well. So again, not official yet, but it does look like if you're going to be out there, and I certainly am going to be out there for games 3 and 4 in LA, the Kings will face the Oilers Friday and Sunday. It appears. We'll let you know if that actually gets official. You could follow us on Twitter. We'll let you know at Locked On LA Kings. The LA Kings handed out their regular season awards on Thursday, and I was fortunate enough to get to vote for the 4 awards that were voted on by the media. The Bill Libby Memorial Award for the most valuable player of the LA Kings went to Anze Kopitar. I actually voted for Phoenix Copley on this one. Kopitar was definitely my second choice, but I thought that Phoenix Copley deserved to be the MVP of the team this year for what he did coming in out of nowhere and basically saving the season for the LA Kings when they needed some solid goaltending. He obviously gave it to them. I don't have a problem with Anze Kopitar winning, but I voted for Phoenix Copley for what it's worth. The Mark Bavis Memorial Award, awarded to the best newcomer, went to Kevin Fiala. I did vote for Fiala. I did give serious consideration to Phoenix Copley as well, but kind of hard when a guy is, if he had not gotten hurt, he would have led the Kings in scoring this year. A lot of pressure on Fiala to come in as the big offseason acquisition, and I thought he absolutely delivered. Again, Phoenix Copley I thought was should have been seriously considered, but I did vote for Kevin Fiala, and that's who the rest of the media apparently voted for as well. The outstanding defenseman went to Drew Doughty. I voted for Drew as well. I did give consideration to Anze Kopitar. I did give consideration to Mikey Anderson. But in the end, I decided to go with Drew Doughty. And the best defensive player, I voted for Anze Kopitar, and he won that award as well. Could have gone, you think, Mikey Anderson, defensive defenseman, but Anze Kopitar is one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL. As much as we love Mikey Anderson, I don't know where he would fit in as far as best defensive defenseman in the NHL. I don't think he would be higher, though, than where Anze Kopitar is for the best defensive forward. So I voted Anze Kopitar. The media did as well. So those were the 4 awards that I got to vote in on, and those were the winners again. MVP of the team, Kopitar. Best newcomer, Fiala. Best defenseman, Doughty. And best defensive player, Kopitar. There were other awards that were voted on by the team themselves. The Ace Bailey Memorial Award for the most inspirational player goes to Phoenix Copley. That was voted on by his teammates. The Unsung Hero Award, also voted on by the players, goes to defenseman Matt Roy. The most popular player, voted by the Kings Booster Club, goes to Adrian Kempe. The Jim Fox Community Service Award goes to Kevin Fiala, which is pretty impressive. His first year with the team, and he gets the Community Service Award. I wonder if Jim Fox actually picks that since his name is on the award. Same goes for Daryl Evans with the Youth Hockey Service Award, which is named the Daryl Evans Youth Hockey Service Award. That went to Quentin Byfield. As for league awards that are coming up, I have not seen any lists of finalists at this point, but I did mention in a previous show that Phoenix Copley has been named as the LA Kings representative, or nominee, I should say, for the Masterton Memorial Trophy. That's the trophy that goes to a player who has exhibited a dedication to the sport of hockey. I think he's actually a very good candidate and could have a chance at winning that award. The King Clancy Memorial Trophy goes to the player who best exemplifies leadership qualities on and off the ice. And Mikey Anderson is the Kings nominee for the King Clancy Trophy. As far as any of the major hardware that is passed out, I think Andrei Kopitar is a strong candidate for the Selke Trophy, given to the best defensive forward. I think he's a strong candidate for the Lady Byng Trophy, basically given out to the player who has the best numbers without, going into the penalty box. Kopi talked about his numbers. He had 4 penalty minutes in 82 games this year, which is a career low for him. Kopitar has won both those awards in the past, and I would not be surprised to see him win one or even both of those awards this season. I will be surprised if he's not a finalist for those awards. I got to think Rob Blake is going to get some serious consideration for General Manager of the Year for what he did in the offseason, bringing in Kevin Fiala, for what he did at the trade deadline, getting Vladislav Gavrikov and Jonas Korpisalo, who have really impacted the team in a positive way. I have heard some say that they think Todd McClellan could be a candidate for the Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year. To be totally honest, I would be surprised if that was the case. I'm not saying that Todd hasn't done a good job this year, but looking at some of the other candidates across the league, that would be a surprise for me if Todd McClellan was a finalist for Coach of the Year in the NHL. I mentioned this a bit on Thursday's show, and now that the regular season is over and the playoffs are about to start, it has been a very fun season for me personally to take over the show and hopefully take it to bigger and better places. Obviously, looking forward to doing more and always improving the show now that I do have a season under my belt. But I greatly appreciate all of you who have taken the time to listen and watch this show. We're going to get more into how you guys have helped this show grow over the past 8 months. And believe me, it has not gone unnoticed by the people who run the Locked On Podcast Network. So again, thank you for your part in this. We certainly aren't done. Looking forward to the playoffs. Like I said, great regular season for the LA Kings and a great regular season for Locked On LA Kings. But let's keep it going. Let's keep this thing going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Hopefully have a deep run and have a lot of really fun shows to talk about here in the next couple of months and weeks. So coming up on Monday's show, we are going to continue our preview of the Kings versus Oilers, and I'll be joined by the host of Locked On Oilers, Brett Holden. He has joined me a couple of times during the regular season to have these crossover shows, and he's a good guy. Seems like a super nice guy. We've been very cordial to each other, but it's playoff time. We might need to take it to another level now that we're meeting for a second straight year in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Looking forward to that show coming up to you for you on Monday. So that's going to do it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed this regular season here on Locked On LA Kings. Again, looking forward to the playoffs. Hopefully you stay connected to the show throughout the year, off season, regular season, postseason. Follow us on Twitter. We are at Locked On LA Kings. We're also on Instagram at Locked On LA Kings. You can always send me an email, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the off season, but I definitely want to get your feedback on things that we can do better with this show going forward. Any ideas you have about maybe off season shows, features, things like that, I am all ears. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great weekend. Looking forward to talking to you on Monday with the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And as always, go Kings, go.